Former Green Beret, Pentagon advisor, and current Florida Congressman Mike Waltz. Congressman, thanks for being here.
Hey, good to be with you, Brett.
Great backdrop, right?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Let's talk first about China, coming off that piece from Kelly and the threat. You know, we saw this meeting between President Biden, virtual meeting, and President Xi, and there was a lot of talk about straightforward competition and not conflict. But there are other people characterize it differently, that China has big, broader goals.
Well, it's not just other people that characterize it differently. It's the Chinese Communist Party themselves. Listen to President Xi's speeches. He's telling his country to prepare for war. He's talking about replacing the United States as a global leader. You know, the path that they're on right now, their Navy is larger than the United States Navy now. They're launching more into space than the rest of the world combined. They're making huge investments in technology that the military can use. But I think the bigger piece, Brett, and this is the real tragedy of it all, is they're doing it with our money. And if you look at the investments that hedge funds like BlackRock, Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan, and frankly, every American out there, that when they see made in China, that dollar is going right into their military industrial complex that our soldiers, sailors, and Marines may one day have to fight.
Whenever we're talking about China, Taiwan and what China does with Taiwan comes up, and it seems like they're getting more and more aggressive. Here is the Secretary of State talking about support for Taiwan.
We are resolutely committed to Taiwan, to making sure it has the means to defend itself. I hope that China's leaders think very carefully about this and about not precipitating a crisis that would have, I think, terrible consequences for lots of people, and one that's in no one's interest, starting with China.
Do you have a sense, or do you know what the Biden administration would do if China invaded Taiwan?
Well, we've gotten mixed messages. I mean, from Biden himself and from his White House. But I think what we need is some real clarity. I mean, if the Chinese take Taiwan, they will essentially control the economies of Japan, South Korea, partially Australia. They will control about 50% of the world's GDP and 40% of the world's trade. And that is something that the United States cannot live with.
Well, you're in these briefs. I mean, do you think it's getting closer?
Oh, it absolutely is getting closer. The Chinese are developing the capability to take Taiwan militarily. I think they would prefer not to have to do that, where Taiwan would just capitulate. But Xi has been clear, one way or another, they are going to what they call reunify, which is forcibly taking Taiwan. What is our response going to be? What will the Japanese response going to be? We need the same clarity that we heard from Reagan, in that the Chinese Communist Party is an evil entity that is oppressing its own people and seeks to export that oppression around the world, and that America will make a stand.
But as far as a timeline, does Capitol Hill?
Well, look, they have the Olympics coming up, what I've dubbed the Genocide Olympics, and have called for a full boycott of those Olympics. That will be a massive propaganda platform for them. We need to remind folks that Putin invaded the Ukraine just 2 months after the Sochi Olympics in 2014. So that'll be a big piece for the Chinese. Xi will get reelected in their Chinese Communist Party this next summer, and I think between summer and when they know Biden may be out of office will be a very dangerous window that they may make a big move.
You mentioned Putin and the current situation with Russia along the border with Ukraine. It seems like it's getting more aggressive by the day.
It is. It's incredibly alarming, Brett. They have over 100,000 soldiers massed on Ukraine's border. Brett, I think at this point it's not a matter of if, but just when. And how far does Putin go? And it is no coincidence that he's doing it after Nord Stream 2 comes online, because he knows when he controls Europe's gas, he can fracture Europe and sideline them in terms of sanctions or any type of military response. And again, we need that clarity that the United States will support the Ukrainians, could send Stingers and air defense, which the Ukrainians have been asking for, and other type of lethal assets. But instead, we've seen kind of some Diplo speak, and as Chris Wallace said, Blinken looks like he's reading from a teleprompter,
quickly,
not standing up.
Ukraine technically is not a part of NATO, so it doesn't fall under Article 5.
Right.
And there's a lot of concern about the U.S. getting in another war, possibly being a proxy war with Russia.
Sure, absolutely. But we have to understand, too, that if Ukraine goes, next will be the Baltics, which are NATO allies. Next could be, I mean, it's a slippery slope. Next could be the Balkans. And, you know, it's no coincidence that Putin went after the Ukraine and Crimea under Obama. The same team is now around Biden. Nord Stream 2 is in place where they can fracture NATO, and they can also starve the Ukraine of gas. So this all is happening in the context after Afghanistan, and we know the Russians watch that closely, and the Chinese are watching now what we do in response to the Ukraine. So these dominoes can begin falling in a way that is detrimental to freedom around the world and certainly to U.S. interests.
This will be a big topic, all these things, here at the National Defense Forum this weekend. Congressman, thanks.
All right. Thanks, Brett.